The Accuser and the Merciful. A morning in the temple courtyard. The sun had not yet crested the hills surrounding Jerusalem, but the air was unusually oppressive. The week of the Feast of Tabernacles was drawing to a close. Throughout the city, the makeshift shelters of leafy branches still stood as reminders of their ancestors' desert wanderings. The night before, while most pilgrims, weary from days of festivity, slept, a group had met in a room with a window overlooking the street. Part 1. The trap is set. In that room, oil lamp light flickered across severe faces. They were scribes and Pharisees, men for whom the law's every jot and tittle were known. Their leader was Jahan, an elder with knife-sharp eyes and a meticulously groomed silver beard. "We cannot let him continue," Jahan said, his voice low and decisive. "This Nazarene's words, 'I am the light of the world,' are blatant blasphemy. He is leading the people astray." A younger man named Eliah slammed his hand on the table impatiently. "And we sit here debating while he draws bigger crowds each day? We must act. And that is why we are here," Jahan replied, a cold smile playing on his lips. "We will act, but not with brute force the people could rally against. We will use his own weapon against him, his false mercy." The plan was meticulously laid out. They had been watching the woman, a commoner, the wife of a weaver, who had been committing adultery with a merchant from another region. Her sin was an open secret. They waited for the right moment. And tonight, they would strike. They would catch her in the act, drag her before the crowd listening to Jesus teach, and present an inescapable dilemma. The law of Moses or the teacher's compassion? Either choice would be his undoing. If he said, "Stone her," his image as a prophet of compassion would shatter. If he said, "Release her," he would publicly defy the sacred law, giving them grounds to arrest him for heresy. "And the man?" someone asked. "Warned and will flee," Jahan answered. "The bait is all we need." Part 2. The Dawn of Shame. As the first hint of dawn lightened the sky, they moved. They burst into the small house, dragging the woman from her bed amidst screams, sobs, and chaos. She clutched a sheet around herself, her hair disheveled, eyes wide with animal terror. The man, as planned, had vanished through a window. She was hauled through streets still dark, her bare feet scraping against the cold stones. None of the men looked directly at her, they saw only a tool. A means to a higher end. Meanwhile, in the temple courts, the atmosphere was utterly different. An air of expectation, of reverence, hung over the vast area known as the Court of the Gentiles. Hundreds, Jews and curious foreigners alike, had gathered early to hear the teacher from Galilee. They sat on the stone pavement or leaned against massive pillars, their eyes fixed on a man sitting humbly on a low step. It was Jesus. His robe was simple, his demeanor calm, but his eyes held a strange depth, as if they could see into a person's core. He was speaking about water, about living water. His voice was low and warm, carrying without the need to shout. "Whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them." The crowd was spellbound. There were hopeful faces of the sick, searching eyes of the disillusioned, and the scrutinizing gazes of those looking for fault. Among them was Simon, a rough fisherman from Bethsaida, sitting near his teacher with a worried expression. He felt the tension in the air, like before a storm. And then, the storm broke. From the eastern gate, a disturbance rippled through, the sound of rapid footsteps, sharp voices cutting through the space. The crowd turned, murmuring, then parted like the Red Sea. A group of religious leaders, faces set in pious anger, marched in. In their midst, shoved forward, was a woman near collapse. All eyes fell on her. Her shame was almost a physical thing, something you could touch. She kept her face down, hair falling to hide her tears, body trembling like a leaf in a strong wind. She was socially dead, and now, physical death was imminent. Jahan stepped forward, his finger pointing accusingly at the woman. His voice rang out, full of carefully staged righteous indignation. "Teacher," he proclaimed, commanding the courtyard's attention, "this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women." He paused, letting the severity of the charge and punishment sink in. Then, with an inviting gesture, he added, "Now what do you say?" The trap was sprung. The space held its breath. Hundreds of people became so quiet one could hear the pigeons cooing on the temple roof. All eyes, of the curious crowd, the gloating accusers, the fearful disciples, were locked on Jesus. What would he do? How could he escape this terrible dilemma? Then, something strange happened. Jesus did not answer. He did not even look up. It was as if he hadn't heard the question. He simply stooped down and began to write with his finger on the ground. Part 3. The writing in the dust. The silence became thick, uncomfortable. "Teacher, do you hear us?" pressed Eliah, the impatient younger man. Jesus continued writing, as if the invisible words in the dust were the only important thing in the universe at that moment. What was he writing? The speculation has lasted millennia. Perhaps he was writing the commandments they themselves had broken. You shall not covet. You shall not bear false witness. Perhaps he was listing the names of the accusers themselves, along with the secret sins known only to them and God, the name of the one who had embezzled, the one who had committed adultery in his heart, the one who had neglected his parents. Or perhaps, as some scholars suggest, he was writing the words of the prophet Jeremiah, "Lord, you are the hope of Israel. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust." Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 13. Whatever the content, the action held extraordinary power. It broke the script. It took the initiative from the accusers and placed them in a position of waiting, of confusion. Their initial confidence began to crack. They shifted from smugness to puzzlement, then to anxiety. Their eyes were no longer on the woman but fixed on Jesus's slowly moving finger, as if afraid to see their own names emerge from the dust. Finally, Jesus stopped writing and raised his head. His gaze swept over them, not with anger or condemnation, but with a profound, weary understanding, a look that saw the towers of pride in their hearts and the fractures within. "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." John chapter 8 verse 7. His words were not a taunting challenge, but a simple declaration of a cosmic truth. Then, once more, he stooped down and continued writing. The impact was devastating. The law they had brought was an external thing, a sword to wield against another. Jesus's question was an internal mirror, forcing each man to confront his own private heart. Their collective righteousness dissolved in the light of individual conscience. The oldest understood first, with decades of life behind them. They knew well the failures, the compromises, the sins hidden beneath robes of piety. One elder, his face lined, his eyes having seen too much, was the first to loosen his grip. The stone he had clutched so tightly fell to the pavement with a small, loud clack in the silence. He turned away, wordless, and walked out of the circle, his back bent under the weight of an undeniable truth. Then another, a scribe, remembered the time he had manipulated a judgment for a bribe. He let his stone drop and slipped away silently. A younger Pharisee, so proud of his purity, suddenly recalled the hatred and pride that had nourished his soul. The false indignation in his eyes died, replaced by shame. He too left. One by one, then in groups, the once determined men now hung their heads, avoiding each other's eyes and the gaze of the crowd. They retreated, melting back into the multitude, leaving behind useless stones on the ground, silent witnesses to the failure of heartless condemnation. Until only two figures remained in the vast courtyard: Jesus, still writing in the dust, and the woman, still huddled on the cold ground, not daring to believe what was happening. Part 4. Neither do I condemn you. Jesus looked up a final time. He glanced around, then his eyes settled on the woman. His voice was gentle, breaking the silence softly. "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" John chapter 8 verse 10. The woman slowly raised her head, her red-rimmed, fearful eyes scanning the empty circle around her. No accusers, no raised stones, only the morning light and stillness. Her words came out as a breath, full of wonder and gratitude. "No one." "Sir." The title, "Sir," escaped her lips not as an empty formality, but as the natural acknowledgement of the grace she had just witnessed. And then Jesus spoke the words that would echo through centuries, embodying his revolutionary message, "Then neither do I condemn you." John chapter 8 verse 11. But the story did not end with mere forgiveness. Forgiveness was not dismissal, it was the doorway to transformation. So he added a command. A call into a future. Go now and leave your life of sin. Then neither do I condemn you, that was grace. The suspension of sin's death sentence. Go now and leave your life of sin, that was the call. The new path made possible by that very grace. In that moment, she was given what her accusers never offered, a true way out. Not an escape from consequence, but liberation from condemnation. She was seen in her utter disgrace, known in her deepest failure, and yet offered a new path. Mercy had not ignored justice, it had fulfilled it on a higher plane, offering a chance for transformation that stones could never achieve. The woman stood up. For the first time since being dragged from her home, she stood straight. She was no longer trembling. She gathered her shawl around her, and without looking back, she walked away, not with the gait of an outcast, but with the dignity of one reborn. She stepped over the discarded stones, now just meaningless pebbles on the path she now walked. Part 5. The Echo in the Courtyard. The crowd, witnessing this stunning inversion of power, where the powerless were empowered and the powerful were disarmed, remained standing in silence. No one cheered. There was no applause, only profound astonishment and worldview-shifting contemplation. Simon the fisherman let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He looked into the eyes of his fellow disciples and saw his own awe reflected there. This was a different kind of power altogether from anything they had seen, not the power of kingdoms or force, but the power of pure truth, shattering hypocrisy like light through darkness. A young man in the crowd, who had come with casual curiosity, whispered to his friend, "This is no ordinary man. No one ever spoke like this." And the remaining religious leaders, those who had not been part of the plot but watched from the periphery, felt a chill of fear run down their spines. Their methods, rules, tradition, condemnation had been neutralized so easily, so utterly. A new authority had been demonstrated, an authority that writes in dust, speaks to conscience, and offers not death for the sinner, but life, true, lasting, redeemed life. That morning, in the court of the Gentiles in Jerusalem's temple, Jesus did not merely save a woman from death by stoning. He exposed the true nature of sin, not as something that exists only in others, but as something that dwells in every human heart. And he pointed to the only way to overcome it, not by casting stones at others, but by kneeling before the mercy of God and rising to walk a new path. The story of the woman caught in adultery remains one of the most powerful and dramatic narratives in history, perfectly capturing the revolutionary heart of Jesus's message, a justice tempered by mercy, and a truth that sets us free.